Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to CCADV's signature fundraising event with Tiffany Dufu. We're so excited to have you join us this afternoon. For many of you, you know that traditionally we would be gathering in the morning in person for a breakfast. We would be honoring multiple people for our first 100 and ongoing. And unfortunately, due to the pandemic, we're not able to physically be together, but we're just so grateful for the chance that we have today to be with you virtually and to recognize the important work of CCADV, the 18 domestic violence organizations in Connecticut. So thank you so very much for being here. As you know, behind every strong organization is a fearless leader, and we are blessed to have David Bogan as our board chair, and he's going to give a few remarks to start off our afternoon. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Karen. You're very kind. And I want to welcome everyone. As Karen said, I have the privilege of serving as CCADV's board chair, and I want to welcome you to our 10th annual signature fundraising event. 10 years. Wow. Blows me away. Who knew? And while this year has been particularly challenging for all of us, it has been overwhelming for victims of domestic violence and those who work on the front lines to address their needs. So I want to thank each of our 18-member domestic violence programs who struggle every day on behalf of the victims of domestic violence. I want to commend CCADV's tireless staff and wonderful board for their commitment to ending domestic violence. I want to thank each of you for your financial support, and certainly want to thank our corporate partners, without whom our work simply would not be possible. Last but not least, I want to thank our tireless, fearless leader, our President and Chief Executive Officer, Karen Jarman, without whose dedication, vision, and hard work, we simply would not be possible, our work wouldn't be possible. She has positioned us so that we can address the needs of the state's victims of domestic violence. So with that, I'll turn it over to Karen, and I thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you, David, and thank you to the CCADV Board of Directors, our incredible staff, many of whom are tuning in at noon today with us, and of course, the leads and the advocates within the 18 domestic violence organization sites. Today, it wouldn't be possible without the incredible generosity of many of our sponsors. Aetna, in particular, and the Pettit Family Foundation have really stepped forward as our presenting sponsors, and we're so grateful and appreciative for this support. Additionally, we have some other sponsors, in particular, AT&T, Dominion Energy, and Bank of America are always there for us, and we thank you so very much for being with us today in such a generous way, an impactful way. Additionally, this event wouldn't be possible, and the success of this fundraiser wouldn't be possible without multiple other sponsors who you find are listed here for you to see. And please, if you know anyone within these organizations, thank them, because we, believe it or not, we reached our fundraising goal, which was really daunting when we thought about this in terms of how and if we could get here during a pandemic. So thank you. As these sponsors and advocate sponsors continue to be listed, I'd just like to say a few remarks. As David referenced, the pandemic has offered enormous challenges to multiple systems and organizations across our country and our state, and in particular, the shut-in orders related to safety and health and well-being of all of us offered really significant implications for victims of domestic violence, because think about if you had to be shut in with your partner who is abusive to you for your health and safety, but shut in nonetheless. And what happened after this pandemic started was remarkable. What we saw is advocates across the state of Connecticut, domestic violence advocates, stepped forward in such a profound way and shifted immediately our CT Safe Connect platform, which is the statewide domestic violence hub and hotline, as well as those 400 advocates across Connecticut, stepped forward, adjusted to something called mobile advocacy. They began reaching out like never before. They increased that outreach by 60% through text, through email, through FaceTime, through live chat, ensuring that victims are safe, safety planning with them. That outreach equated to a 130% increase in what we would traditionally see in a normal time. there were other implications of this horrendous pandemic. And that is centered around the circumstance whereby we could not go over capacity in shelters. So there was a demand for shelter like never before. At one point during the height of the pandemic, that demand equated to 145% capacity in shelters. So what that means is we had to keep those numbers low in shelters for social distancing, and then we put families in hotels. Where that really fell is the unanticipated cost of more than $421,000 to hotel families and to keep them safe. So we have advocates who are working diligently within those 18 sites, and they are keeping families safe in shelter, in communities, and in hotels. Where CCADV comes into this equation is really taking that lead and responsibility of helping to resource those hotel costs so that the 18 sites aren't absorbing those costs, because we know that it's simply not possible. In terms of the mobile advocacy, there were continuous weekly, bi-weekly phone calls, conference calls, FaceTime, Zoom calls with advocates, shifting policy, shifting practice, sharing information, outreach and communication to ensure that we had a very strong systemic response to domestic violence despite this pandemic. And finally, CCADV led around improved policy and practice so we could adjust. In particular, we worked with the governor's office, Connecticut Legal Services, and the judicial branch to allow for online restraining orders during this pandemic because courts were understandably closing. But we wanted to ensure that this safety remedy was present for victims as an option for them. So you're going to hear more about the work that we do throughout this morning, and then of course hear from the great Tiffany Dufu. So I thank you so much for being with us. Tracy Scraba, who is the Vice President and Chief Privacy Officer at CVS Health, is going to also offer a few words as one of our presenting sponsors. Thank you, Tracy, and thank you, CVS Health, for your support, in particular to Sean Gallagher, who sits on our board and has been such a helpful leader for us.
Thank you, Karen. Good afternoon. It is an honor and a pleasure to be speaking to all of you today on behalf of Aetna, a CVS Health company. My name is Tracy Scraba, and I am the Chief Privacy Officer of CVS Health. At CVS Health and Aetna, our purpose is helping people on their path to a better health. We surround those we serve with personal support that matches their unique circumstances. Sometimes those circumstances include social challenges, family issues, and yes, those experiencing domestic violence situations. We are pioneering a bold new approach to total health, creating innovations that not only help people get well, but help people stay well in body, mind, and spirit. And caring for our communities has never been so critical. As you've already heard mentioned, it is no secret that domestic violence is on the rise during the pandemic. As a matter of fact, the New England Journal of Medicine recently referred to domestic violence as a pandemic within a pandemic. We all know that the closures of schools and childcare facilities have added to stress in the home, and this added stress has not only led to increased partner violence, but also increased child abuse. There is less ability for mandated reporters such as teachers and school counselors and clinicians to assess and recognize this abuse, added with the fear of victims to report this type of abuse really has gotten a lot of experts in this area has a lot of concern, and you all know better than I do about those issues. Now is the time to bring more awareness and to strengthen our collective efforts in responding to domestic violence in communities around the corner and around the country. I am so looking forward to today's virtual program, and I wish you all well in mind, body, and spirit. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you. Thank you, Tracy, for those wonderful words of support, and thank you to Aetna. For those of you who might not be aware, we worked with now our board member, Sean Gallagher, and his team at Aetna around workplace policy related to domestic violence. You've really been in the forefront of this issue, and we appreciate your support and your leadership in those areas. Senator Blumenthal, our United States Senator here in Connecticut, is also a leader. He's very involved in the Men Who Make a Difference program that is a keystone project within Interval House. Senator Blumenthal has worked with us on federal policies related to taking firearms away from abusers in the case of an ex parte restraining order on a federal level. I'm pleased to offer his remarks with us today. Thank you, Senator Blumenthal.
Hi, I'm Richard Blumenthal, your United States Senator. I am so deeply honored and excited to be with you for this virtual gala. I wish it were in person, but it is no less meaningful because the work of the Connecticut Coalition Against Domestic Violence is more important than ever. I've seen firsthand, as all of you have as well, the hurt and harm done by domestic violence. And we know, even in normal terms, the horrendous impact is staggering. 1 in 4 women will suffer the effects of sexual assault or domestic violence in their lifetimes. And the effects have only increased, been aggravated by the pandemic. So I want to begin by saluting Karen Jarmock and all of her great staff and all the volunteers and board members who are supporting this great organization. Particularly thanks to Bill Pettit and his foundation, as well as Aetna, for sponsoring this evening's event. And to all who care about this issue, please know that we are working on it to try to address this issue in a bipartisan way through the Lori Jackson Domestic Violence Protection Survivor Act, which I introduced again this year, through VAWA, the Violence Against Women Act, which I hope will pass this year, through other measures that provide additional financial resources for organizations like this one that make such a difference. In the meantime, I know that advocate call time has increased 130%, which is a staggering reflection of how more deeply and widespread this problem has affected women. My heart goes out to every one of the victims and survivors, and I hope we will keep faith with them and with this great organization in meeting this challenge. Thank you for inspiring us, and thank you for supporting the Connecticut Coalition Against Domestic Violence. Thank you.
Senator Blumenthal, we appreciate your remarks, and your support on this issue has been unwavering. So thank you. We are next going to hear from one of our other fearless board members, Dr. Tracy Brennan. Some of you might know her as your practitioner. In our world, we know her as someone who has helped us lead with our Director of Health Professional Outreach, Ashley Starr-Frechette, telehealth, linking patients to help, screening, education. I think for Women's Health Connecticut, who's one of our sponsors today, they've asked that question, do you feel safe at home, to more than 150,000 patients at this point. And Dr. Brennan is going to talk a little bit about that and also share her ideas of how you could also support CCADV. So thank you, Dr. Brennan, for being with us.
Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Tracy Brennan, and I'm a practicing gynecologist in the Hartford area. I have seen firsthand the devastating health consequences for women and families who are living in intimate partner violence. Intimate partner violence has become an epidemic in our country and occurs at twice the rate of a breast cancer diagnosis for women. My group, Women's Health Connecticut, comprised of 250 OBGYNs, has partnered with CCADV to commit to performing universal screening for intimate partner violence on every patient each year. The training, which helped us to learn how to ask these sensitive questions of women, and more importantly, how to provide them with resources should they reveal that they are a victim of intimate partner violence, has been invaluable and was provided to us by CCADV. This universal practice of screening every woman every year has been life-altering for me as a practitioner, and has been life-altering for many of my patients who've been waiting a lifetime for a healthcare practitioner to ask them about intimate partner violence. If a patient does reveal that she is the victim of intimate partner violence, I can immediately call CT Safe Connect and link her with a trained domestic violence advocate. CCADV has also trained several of our staff members so that we have people available in the office to speak face-to-face to patients if they reveal this information during a visit. What has impressed me so much about CCADV is that it truly is a boots-on-the-ground organization working each and every day in a practical way to change the face of intimate partner violence in our state of Connecticut through advocacy, public policy, education, public awareness. This organization has educated me as a healthcare professional and made me able to ask patients about these sensitive issues and to help them provide resources to them in their time of need. The pandemic has been an exceptionally difficult time for all of us, but especially for women living with intimate partner violence due to the extreme isolation. CCADV reacted to our changing world swiftly and effectively. CCADV has made every effort to connect with women and other victims of intimate partner violence through increased social media presence and paid advertising. You heard earlier from Karen about advocacy efforts on the state and federal level should help change policy in a common sense way for women who are suffering during this pandemic. Especially the applications for restraining orders online and alternative safe housing options like short-term leases come to mind immediately. Survivors of intimate partner violence across the state of Connecticut need this work to continue. I need this work to continue. We all need this work to continue, and CCADV needs the resources in order to continue their work of reaching victims, changing policy, strengthening policy, public awareness, and education of the entire population so that we can end the violence before it begins. I urge you to give whatever you can. Every donation matters. Every donation will make an impact. Please go to ctcadv.org. Click Make a Donation in the right upper corner. That's ctcadv.org. I thank you for your support of this amazing and life-saving work. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Brennan. How fortunate are we at CCADV to have such a remarkable member of our board and advocate within the medical community to share her experience, which again has been life-altering in terms of asking that important question. Do you feel safe at home? And it's really been eye-opening for all of us to understand the number of individuals who are answering in a way that helps us to understand that they need safety and that they need support. And please know when someone reaches out to CT Safe Connect, that will always ultimately connect a victim to their local domestic violence organization. They are doing that really important work on the ground, keeping survivors safe in collaboration with the CT Safe Connect advocates. So thank you, Dr. Brennan. I encourage you to go to our website. We were trying to determine the easiest way for us to do that today without making it complicated. We would appreciate it if you would consider clicking on that Make a Donation icon at the top of our website and giving your additional support today or your first time support today. Every single dollar is going to help us and make a difference. So thank you. I'd like to introduce now some remarks from Senator Chris Murphy, who has also been incredibly gracious with his time and energy on this issue, and in particular, working with us to reauthorize the Violence Against Women Act, which actually has been up for reauthorization for more than 2 years. Congress approved a new Violence Against Women Act law more than a year and a half ago. We've been waiting for the United States Senate to take this up. There's important policy and provisions in there that speak to our ability to do our work. And Senator Murphy has been in front of all of this and is going to speak on that this afternoon.
Hey everybody, Chris Murphy, a United States Senator. Thanks to the Connecticut Coalition Against Domestic Violence for all that you do to serve the 40,000 some odd victims of domestic violence that are seeking services every year. I remember as a little kid, my mom would leave the house once a week to go volunteer at one of our local shelters. And at a very young age, I was taught how much effort has to go into serving those who are seeking refuge from dangerous situations at home. The staff efforts, the volunteer efforts, and of course, the work that you're doing right now to raise private funds. I frankly wish you didn't have to do this. I wish that the federal government, the state government allocated you every dime necessary to tackle the scourge of domestic violence in this country. But I'm thankful that you're still going out and raising these private dollars, and I'm glad to be able to hop on and urge you in these efforts. Listen, you know the work we have to do. We have to get VAWA passed here in Washington. It's just heartbreaking to me that this has become a partisan issue. You know, when I first got to Congress, VAWA was one of the things that Republicans and Democrats just automatically agreed on. And now, all of a sudden, it's really hard to get Republicans to support VAWA, at least a version of VAWA that gets the full job done. My hope is that early in 2021, we'll make this a priority, and then we'll tackle the issue of gun violence, and we'll build in the real protections that are necessary to close the boyfriend loophole to make sure that we do everything possible to take guns away from dangerous spouses or boyfriends, domestic partners that may end up turning that gun on their partner. We got a lot of work to do here in Washington. We want to support you in any way that we can in your work in Connecticut. Thank you once again for your commitment to this effort.
Thank you, Senator Murphy, for those remarks, and fingers crossed that we'll see progress around VAWA, hopefully in the next couple of months, because again, this is really important legislation that speaks to violence against women in our country. Sadly, last year in 2019, there were 14 individuals, I should say, who were murdered by their intimate partner. We know that those were primarily women in the majority of circumstances, and also primarily women of color. And so we are grateful for any progress that we can make around VAWA in the upcoming session in the federal side. Now it is my pleasure to introduce Kai Belton, who's our director of clinical for CT Safe Connect. Kai used to be the lead at New Horizons in Middletown, and we are fortunate to have her here within our organization supporting the clinical side of Safe Connect. And just for everyone to know that increasingly during the pandemic, as you can imagine, outreach for help has involved really complex situations, volatile situations. And so Kai and her clinical team have been supporting that need within our organization, and we appreciate that. And Kai has been gracious around connecting with Joelle Murchison, who's going to be interviewing Tiffany. And so thank you, Kai, for introducing Joelle.
Thank you, Karen, and good afternoon to everyone. And it is my pleasure to introduce today's facilitator, Joelle Murchison. Joelle combines her passion and expertise in education, equity and inclusion, and communications in her work as the founder and principal of Exec Mommy Group, LLC, an inclusion, leadership, and coaching consulting practice. When I first learned of the name of Joelle's consulting practice, my thought was, wow, this is so fitting. Some years ago, Joelle and I were PTO members together at Capital Prep in Hartford, where our children attended school. And as the PTO president at that time, I can say that Joelle, a mom of 4, deserved a gold star for her exceptional parental engagement. Her professional career and dedication to diversity, education, and inclusion has also been exceptional, making Exec Mommy Group a very fitting name. Joelle, a graduate of Brown University, Harvard Graduate School of Education, and Syracuse University's Newhouse School of Public Communications. Also currently serves as the Executive Director of the Lawyers Collaborative for Diversity and as an adjunct faculty member at the University of Connecticut School of Business. Joelle is a career diversity and inclusion champion, utilizing her expertise throughout Connecticut and beyond. Joelle, thank you for all the hard but necessary work you're doing to create change during these challenging times, and welcome.
Kai, thank you so much for such a generous introduction. It really is my honor to have been asked to be here with you all today as we help bring awareness to the need to support our efforts across the state of Connecticut to ensure that all individuals are safe and free from domestic violence. It is really an honor today for me to have the opportunity to welcome a wonderful, wonderful individual to our conversation. Tiffany Dufu, who you all will come to know momentarily, is a force of nature. She's a woman who at one point in her life decided that it was time to take a pause. And in that context, it provided her the opportunity to create, in particular, not only a book, but also a movement that has allowed women across the country and surely across the world to realize their opportunities and to find ways to partner with one another towards their success. One thing that I love about Tiffany, if you go onto her website, the very first thing that you see when she comes up is a statement about why she's on the planet. And she says simply, if you want something you've never had before, you have to do something you've never done before in order to get it. And so with that, I would like to welcome our speaker for today, Tiffany Dufu, who I have the privilege of having a wonderful conversation with. Tiffany, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me. One of my sponsors and mentors is a woman named Marie C. Wilson. She built the Ms. Foundation for Women. She started Take Our Daughters to Work Day. And one of the things that Marie taught me is that you should always introduce a woman in such a way that she will want to know herself. And as I was listening to you, Joelle, I was thinking, oh, is that me? I want to know who she's talking about. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It's really my pleasure. Well, we have a chance to learn a little bit about you through today's conversation. And as I always hope that we leave a little something with folks differently than how they came. So as I was referring to earlier, and I would encourage all of you to check out Tiffany's website because it really gives you, and it's tiffanydufu.com. Because it gives you a real insight into who she is. And it's also an opportunity for you to learn about this tremendous book that she's written. I had the opportunity actually to get a copy and read her book when it was first released. And I thought to myself, oh, a sigh of relief. Finally, someone has demonstrated a way forward for all of us women. As Kai referenced, we were at the time when we first met, moms raising kids, being involved in the parent-teacher organization, in addition to all of our other career and personal pursuits. And this book was so timely. Tiffany's book is entitled Drop the Ball. And it literally gives us permission to let something go and not feel guilty about it. So Tiffany, talk to me about that book. How did that begin? How did the process behind that, the thought process behind that begin? And tell me, how exactly can we drop a ball and not feel guilty?
Sure. Well, first of all, I should state full disclosure that I wrote a book called Drop the Ball because I used to be someone who was terrified of ever dropping a ball. I used to feel that dropping the ball meant that I was failing to take timely action. It meant that I was not fulfilling my responsibility to my family, to my community. I know it sounds dramatic, but it felt like at that time, if I dropped the ball, I would be disappointing the entire Black race, as in if I dropped this ball at work, they're never going to hire another Black person again. I mean, there was a lot of pressure. What happened to me was not that I came up with this amazing philosophy for how to drop the ball. What happened is what happens to a lot of people in their lives, which is that I had a life-changing moment in which all of the balls that I had so beautifully managed to keep in the air previously came crashing down to the floor. For me, it was the birth of my first child. I've spoken to hundreds of women and listened to their stories. It could be that you finally got the promotion and figured out that it's a lot harder to be the boss than you always thought it was going to be. It could be a diagnosis that could be your moment. For many people right now, the viral pandemic, the economic recession is the moment in which folks are having to figure out, what do I do when all the balls are just rolling all over the floor? So I learned though during that process, this, what I call a Tiffany's epiphany, which is that a lot of balls can be on the floor and Armageddon never hit. In other words, all of the things that I was always afraid would happen if I ever dropped a ball, none of those things happened. No one fired me from my job. No one called me to tell me they didn't love me anymore. They weren't going to be my friend because I didn't return their text message or their phone call or attend the party. No one came to read me my Miranda rights, which I always thought would happen if I didn't deal with the alternate side parking tickets that had piled up. So over time, I learned to kind of reappropriate the term drop the ball. And for me now, dropping the ball means that I have figured out what matters most to me, that I figured out what my highest and best use is in achieving what matters most, instead of just saying yes to everything that comes over the plate. And most importantly, I figured out how to meaningfully engage other people in my life to help secure my success, but also the success of people around me. I've fundamentally gotten help. Now, the book Drop the Ball is a bit of a romantic comedy. It's it's a story about how I got my husband off the couch. But overall, it's really a book about how do we really reevaluate our expectations of ourselves. And, I'll say that one of the most important things that all of us can do is to really get honest about what is driving us. Part of the reason why I'm really excited to support the work of this organization is because for a long time, I thought that what was driving my need for perfection was the work ethic that my parents instilled in me, this need for excellence. I thought that if I tried to do it all and have it all, that somehow that would mean I was a good performer. But when I really began to dig in that pause of writing this book, at Tiffany, what is really driving you? A lot of it was connected to my mom, who found out she was pregnant with me when she was 19, who sacrificed a tremendous amount in order for me to be able to be, where I am. When I was 16, my parents got divorced and my mom eventually got remarried. And unfortunately, she spun into a vicious cycle of poverty and addiction and violence with her second husband. And experiencing my mom as a victim of domestic violence fueled my ambition in a way that I hadn't really delved into. Basically, I didn't want to be in that circumstance. And so I feel that, being a good mom is all about my livelihood. It's all about securing our financial future. And that was propelling a lot of the perfectionism. So I think really getting clear about what's driving you, what's underneath the pressure that you feel, I think is first and foremost, really getting clear about what matters to you. In terms of guilt, I wish we could banish guilt. Like I'm on a mission to slay guilt because it's this really insidious feeling that you're committing some moral transgression, that you're doing something wrong. I have to say, I've worked with hundreds of women. You have too, Joelle. I have never met a woman who wasn't every day just trying to do right by herself, her family, her community. And the fact that in the process of doing that, you could feel that you're doing something wrong, I just find a travesty. And I really wish that we could banish guilt. The only effective strategy that I've ever been able to implement for getting rid of guilt has to do with aligning my values and my expectations of myself with my behaviors, okay, in a very deliberate way. What happens when we feel guilty is that our integrity isn't aligned because we have some value, something that we believe, and we feel that our behavior isn't lining up with that value, okay? You could have a value around being a good mom, being a nurturing mom. And there are behaviors that society associates with that. One of the more typical behaviors is physical presence. Society associates, we won't get into the details of it, a mother's physical presence with her being a nurturer. Right. So there was a while where, because I wasn't spending as much physical time with my kids, I would always feel guilty. The way that I managed that is by saying, wait a minute. For me, nurturing, if I want to, create my own job description for what it means to be a good mom, means that I'm providing some economic security for my kids. And in order to do that, I need to spend a bit of time outside of the home, earning a living. That's what it means for me to be a good nurturer, of my kids. And so whenever I run up against a person or an individual or an advertising campaign, Choosy Moms Choose Jif, or a television show or whatever it is that's reinforcing for me that, to be nurturing means that I need to spend 24/7, with these kids, I can say, you know what, that's not for me. For me, providing the economic security for my family and for my kids is what it means to be a nurturer, and I'm doing that. So that's really has been my only trick for me managing the guilt.
Well, Tiffany, that's wonderful, because I think there's so many things that you touched on in your comments that are so relevant, both to women more broadly, but certainly to all people as we think about who we are, and really ensuring that we're aligning those things that we desire and the behaviors that we connect to them. I want to go back to one point that you made about sometimes, not just dropping the ball, but finding those folks who can assist, right? Getting your husband off the couch, and the notion of passing the ball. My best friend and I talk about that quite a bit, that sometimes you're not going to be able to get everything that you need, perhaps, from that one person, that significant other, that spouse, perhaps even your best friend, your children, that you need individuals around you who can help to shore you up in those moments. In some cases, it may be someone who comes and grabs your kid for a few minutes to play with them while you've got work to do. Or in other instances, it's that friend who says, come on, let's go have a glass of wine, or today on Zoom, so that you have a moment to relax. And we talk about the importance of having a village around us. What you've done essentially in a more formal way is created that village in the context of the crew. Tell me a little bit about how some of the experiences that you shared around, dropping and perhaps passing the ball inspired you to start the crew.
Yes, absolutely. I am the cumulative investment of a lot of people, who have poured themselves into me. My mom has poured herself into me, my mentors, my sponsors. But certainly for the past decade or so, I have really benefited from having a group of individuals who I call my crew. It's a group of women. There are 9 of us, and they do a few things that are really important in terms of my own success. One is that they're the group that always knows what my ambitions are, what my goals are. They help me to create a plan. They inspire me, but most importantly, they hold me accountable to what it is that I say I'm going to do, both in my personal life and in my professional life. And for a few years, I had been evangelizing this idea of the crew. I had for many years said yes to pretty much every woman that reached out to me. I would meet women on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 9, 10, and 11 a.m. And at the end of those conversations, I would kind of give this pep talk about how you should find your crew. Because one of the observations that I've made is that even though we often have a lot of people around us, our family, our coworkers, our friends, we still psychologically perceive our journeys as if they're solo endeavors, meaning that if we have a problem, the first question we'll often ask ourselves is, how am I going to solve this problem? When I think the more important question we should all be asking ourselves is, who is going to help me solve this problem? Well, in January of 2018, I was giving my You Need to Find Your Crew pep talk to a woman who basically responded by saying, Tiffany, I understand theoretically, this idea, but I don't think you appreciate the amount of work that goes in to finding a crew in the way that you've described. And then she walked me through the workflow. She was like, okay, so first I have to get access to the cocktail party or the conference or the event. My goodness, now that we're in the midst of, this pandemic, she couldn't have even have done that. Then she said, I've got to awkwardly introduce myself to them, collect a bunch of business cards that are probably going to sit in the bottom of my bag or some desk drawer. You want me to take those out, reach out to all of these people, schedule the coffees, the teas, the lunches. You want me to then curate a group of them and organize regular meetings where we put forth our goals together. Did I mention I have a full-time job? I came to you because you wrote this book called Drop the Ball. I've got 3 kids. I've got a mom with a diagnosis and a commute and a dog. I don't have time to do what you're describing. And that for me was another Tiffany's epiphany, because I recognized, oh, if my life's work really is advancing women and girls, then I should probably stop preaching to them about how they need to find a crew, and I should find the crew for them. And so that's basically what the crew does. You give us some information about yourself by applying, and then we match you with 7 other women. You become a crew, and you collaborate to meet your life goals together in a very clear way. You kind of determine what your goals are, and you meet on a regular basis, and they ensure that you're moving forward. So many of us already have a crew. I think what's most important, whether it's this crew or any other crew, is that your crew is objective. It should be people who care about you, but don't have a huge stake in your decision making, so they can give you really great coaching. 2, your crew should be diverse. You need different perspectives, who can give you guidance and advice and counsel. So if your crew is just the people that you went to college with, I highly, encourage you to shake things up. And lastly, your crew is there to hold you accountable, to hold your feet to the fire, sometimes in a way that people who are the closest to us might not be able to do. But I'm on the planet to ensure that every woman has a crew.
And I so appreciate that. In fact, I just went back in my LinkedIn messages. You may not recall that in early 2018, you and I connected for one of those 20-minute conversations that you make available to all women. At the time, I was in the midst of writing a book that I still have not actually completed. But I'd read an article about you, and you referenced some really great advice, which I think, to your point, it was a precursor to really sort of formalizing what it would take in terms of a crew. And it was, reaching out to people who had the information that you were seeking to ask them about it. And I asked you at that time, how did you find an agent? How did you begin this process? And I really appreciated your willingness to have that 20-minute conversation. So I don't know if you know that you responded and incorporated me in that context as well. So I do appreciate that. When I think about exactly as you described, the importance of having a diverse set of women or individuals who can provide you context and who are different things to you, right? You need some people who are your cheerleader, some people who are going to be your matter of fact listen. I have a friend who I literally will put reminders in my calendar to remind her to do the things that she committed to do. Oh, yeah, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. And I'm that person for her. I'm the, oh man, she really put it in her calendar and she really texted me this morning. Yeah, I did. And so we do need people in all of those different spheres to be able to show up for us at all times to help us to be our best, without a doubt. If there are folks out who are listening, men or women, as you think about, I'm reflecting upon your experiences around your mom and taking the probably challenging situations and turning them into inspiration that drove you to move forward and do the things that you needed to do. Oftentimes I wonder, as we think about women who, your mom had done a wonderful thing. She brought you into this world and nurtured you to the point that she had. Sometimes we think about folks who end up in situations around domestic violence as not people who are successful and accomplished and appear to have it all together. And oftentimes it's that small inner voice that's telling us that we need to find help. We need to step out, that this is not behavior, to your point, that's aligned with who we are. How do you encourage, as I said, men or women, trans men or women, individuals who are listening, how do you encourage them to take that small voice that tells them this is not who you are. This is not in alignment, and pushes you to move to that next season that it leads you to where you desire to be.
Yeah, I encourage them to make that voice louder, much louder. One of the gifts that my mother gave me, my upbringing was a bit of an experiment. She believed that, like you said at the beginning, if you want something you've never had before, you're going to have to do something you've never done before in order to get it. And one of the tools that she used to parent me were affirmations. Every day, my mother would look at me in my eyes and she would say, as if it was the first time that she had ever said it, as if she was just discovering it for the first time. Tiffany, you are so smart. You are so loved. You are so beautiful. And she would say it with such delight. Now, of course, by the time I was 13 or 14, it was quite annoying, that she did this. But that voice, that she was putting in my ear was very important because it's the counter voice to, I'm not worthy. I don't belong in this room. I don't know what I'm doing. I've never started a business before. Like I'm not 20 years old with a hoodie and a can of Red Bull. How am I going to do this? And it becomes a counter. Now, I had that gift. Unfortunately, my mother didn't have, she didn't mother herself. So she didn't have that gift, but that's the first thing I encourage all of us to do. I still use those affirmations. Anytime someone tells me something that is encouraging or positive, for example, this summer I was raising another round of capital for my company. And one of my investors, when I was feeling very daunted about this, I asked her, do you think we can pull this off? And she said, Tiffany, if there's a founder who can raise right now, it's you, you're top 1%. And I wrote it down. Anything that someone tells me that's a compliment or that I feel is a good affirmation, I write it down. And I have them, like tons of them. They're all over my desk. I paste them, to my wall. And I surround myself with people who believe in me, who believe that, I'm valuable. And so there's so much more that could be said. But I would say start with amplifying. If it's a little voice, amplify it, scream it to yourself, write it down, put it on the walls, and surround yourself, recruit people in your life who want you to be your best self.
That's excellent. Amplify that little voice. And I do think it's really powerful to write those things down. Sometimes it's often hard, particularly for us as women, to receive compliments. And we always have a retort, someone, oh, I love that pair of shoes. Oh, these old things, right? We have to learn to receive, and as you modeled, to really write them down and hold on to those compliments that help to affirm us as we move forward. So now let's talk about this business and this capital raising thing. I am just totally enamored with the notion of, as you talk about the evolution of your business to the point where, and for all of you folks watching, you should know that this woman who you are looking at raised $2 million plus for her business this summer, I think, within a specific period of time. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. So the Crew is a venture-backed company. I needed to raise, I'm not a high net worth individual who can just completely bootstrap a company like the Crew. And so as women were applying to the Crew and more were applying than what I could really manage, given our infrastructure, I decided to raise venture capital. I raised my first round last summer, $1 million, and I just closed another round of $2 million over the summer. It's very rare for women to raise venture capital. It's even rarer for women of color. Of all the venture that was distributed, that was raised over the past decade, only 0.06% of it has gone to Black female founders. But again, as with anything in life, I have a crew. So, I would say that number one, I think it's really important, whatever you're passionate about, whatever you need to persuade people about. In this case, it was raising capital, but it might be a conversation with your boss about how you need to raise, your salary. Whatever it is that you need to advocate for, I think first and foremost, making sure that you have one or two people who can demystify the process for you. For me, that was initially very incredible man named Evan Cohen, who spent some time in Silicon Valley, who I recruited as a sponsor to help explain to me, how does venture capital work? How do I raise this? But I also think that listening is really important. When you're raising capital for a business like The Crew, you have to meet with a lot of people. I met with 77 investors, some of them multiple times, in order to raise the $2 million. Now, these are people who spend all day, every day, listening to pitches. So I decided that I would use my meetings with them, because the vast majority of them are going to decline to invest. That's part of the game. You get a lot of rejection. To leverage them for their wisdom and for their insight about the business. So part of my strategy for raising is to start with just talking for 10 minutes about a question that they think, and to use all of that insight and wisdom as I go along to get better, to inform the business, to inform the strategy, to inform the pitch. And so having a level of self-awareness, no matter what you're doing, who you're trying to persuade, and really listening to how can I learn? How can I grow? What are the questions that I need to ask someone in order for me to get the feedback that I need to hear, not just the feedback that I want to hear, in order for me to be able to take the next step, I think was a really important part of that process.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, because I think, there are likely folks who are listening who, may in fact be business owners, or who have an idea, but are very overwhelmed with the concept of how to move it to fruition, particularly in terms of the kind of appetite that may be there, the demand that may be there to scale the work. So that is just incredible in terms of how you really took, and particularly the lesson of taking rejection and turning it into redirection, if you will, right? How do you repurpose those concepts that you learn from those rejections that really end up redirecting you and enhancing the work that you do? That's incredible, absolutely incredible. Congratulations, and we certainly wish you more and more success in terms of getting what you need to support the good work that you're doing. Absolutely.
I'm going to have to use that. I'm going to have to repurposing rejection.
Go for it.
I love that.
Go for it.
I love that. I will credit you.
I appreciate it. It's amazing how quickly time flies by when we're in dialogue. And there's one last question that I've been asking a number of folks over the last several months, as our nation has really been in a period of uncertainty. You articulated earlier on so many of the things that we are facing in this nation, and there are many among us who aren't quite sure how, in fact, they will get through it. But I guess in the context of your vantage point, as you think about, all of the things that have befallen our nation and individuals and families and the challenges that we've faced, what would you say, in spite of all of that, gives you hope? What gives you hope?
I think the resiliency of people, of humanity, gives me hope. I'm a very proud American. And part of the reason why I'm very proud is because I've seen time and time again that during moments of uncertainty, people rise to the occasion. There may be some people that don't, and they may get more headlines. But fundamentally, for the most part, people rise. And Karen talked about how that happened with the work of CCADV during this pandemic. The mobile advocacy, the people stepping in, that's what gives me hope, that even in the depths of despair, even in the depths of crisis, that people fundamentally believe in the possibility and that they're willing to sacrifice themselves. Think about all of the essential workers, who sacrifice themselves and their families and their safety for the betterment of all of us. I believe that's the majority of humanity. I believe that's the majority of my fellow Americans. And it's giving me an enormous amount of hope right now.
Well, Tiffany, thank you so much for spending time with us. The time flew by, and I'm sure that there's so much more that we certainly could have talked about. But I really do appreciate you for the lessons and the messages that you left with all of us today. I think that they will allow us to move forward, certainly with renewed vision as we think about our own opportunities, how we can expand and find our crew and also so that all of the advocates and supporters of CCADV are encouraged and inspired to find hope in the midst of these trying times. So Tiffany, thank you so much for being here with us. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you.
Thank you. Thanks, Joelle.
Thank you. Karen?
Well, Tiffany and Joelle, thank you so very much for what an incredible afternoon to hear your inspirational words. I'm already thinking, who is my crew? Who is your crew? Many of my crew are actually on right now watching, and I know who you are, and I thank you for tuning in. And what gives me hope is the amazing resiliency of the advocates who are working so diligently within all of the 18 sites right now to keep victims of domestic violence safe, and those victims who are so brave and courageous to take those steps necessary to live their life free from violence. We're going to close today with some remarks from Dr. Bill Pettit, State Representative Bill Pettit, who really has been a remarkable support, not just to CCADV, but I know to many of the organizations that are doing this work. So Dr. Pettit, thank you very much for being such a lead supporter through the Pettit Family Foundation, and we appreciate your joining us today.
You're very welcome, Karen. Thank you to Joelle and Tiffany for that presentation. It's obviously been a tough year with the pandemic. Big changes for all of us in terms of staying home and masks and social distancing and people losing jobs, a lot of people being ill. As you've heard, there's had to be a lot of mobile outreach in terms of televisits, in terms of social work, in terms of healthcare. And I think a couple things stick with me that Joelle and Tiffany were talking about. One is empowerment. It's important to empower the people that have had problems with interpersonal violence, domestic violence, so that they can become not only survivors, but thrivers. And I think that's partly what Tiffany is pushing for, and it pushes the concepts of hope and kindness, resiliency. We all hope for a better future. We hope that there'll be less domestic violence. We hope that we all can reach out. So I hope that everyone can come away from this and do a couple of things. Even if you don't have the money at this point, you've lost your job and you can't contribute, if you can talk to other people about this, that'll be a big help. If you can't contribute funds, you can contribute your talent, you can contribute your time. So I think it's important for us to continue the conversation, to talk about this so people are aware. It's become obviously much more aware this year than in many years in the past. And we've seen an upsurge in terms of domestic violence, in terms of child abuse, in terms of suicide, in terms of people not taking care of their health, creating other issues, the social isolation and mental health issues, which is contributing to all of this. So reach out. Your crew, and I'm as guilty of as anyone, reach out to friends, reach out to acquaintances, people you haven't seen in a while, people who you would see intermittently and just haven't seen because of the pandemic. Reach out, offer them hope, offer them a little lifeline, and reach out to organizations through CCADV, whether you're, in my area here is Prudence Crandall. I'm part of that Men Make a Difference for Interval House. As Karen has mentioned, we have 18 domestic violence groups throughout the state, all with the different catchment areas. So anyone who's on this call from any part of the state can reach out and be quite helpful. So please reach out and look to help others. Reach out and look to help CCADV or the domestic violence groups in your area, and it can be done with time, talent, and treasure, because the need is so great. And I have hope that we will do better. And I thank CCADV for everything. And thank Karen and Liza for putting this together, as well as the board. Thank the other sponsors for coming on and doing this. And thank the boots on the ground, the workers who've been out there talking to people, going to their homes, getting in their cars, talking on the phone, and helping people, doing the hard work that helps people who have become victims of domestic violence become survivors and then thrivers and get out and accomplish great things. So thank you very much. And thank you, Karen and Liza, for everything you do.
As always, thank you very much, Bill, for your participation in today's event. I know how busy you are. Thank you to everyone who took an hour out of their day to participate in this wonderful gathering in recognition and in support of the work of the Connecticut Coalition Against Domestic Violence. And let's all think about who are those people in our life who are going to help us amplify our voices, who are going to be our cheerleaders. We all are needing that right now. And Tiffany, I think those were terrific words of wisdom for us to keep with us as we go into the weekend. I'd like to thank Liza Andrews, who you can't see, but she has been behind the scenes for this Zoom presentation with the pressure on her to keep it all moving. Liza, thank you. And thank you to everyone who gave remarks today, and also for those who tuned in. We appreciate your support. Carry on. Have a great weekend, and we'll talk soon. Thank you.